Hi everyone, we're testing now the Sigma 18mm to 35mm f1.8. This is a very popular lens. This is a crop lens and I'm gonna test it on a crop sensor body, but it's a not native lens here, so I need an adapter, and my adapter is Fringer EF-FX II, and I'm gonna test the autofocus and how it communicates with this camera. By the way, I have the latest firmware uploaded to the X-T3, and we'll see how it works with this Sigma, with this body. Okay, now we see this lens in close-up. As you see, it's really well built, and I have it brand new here, and it looks just fantastic. It's so well. Its construction, I think, is perfect. As for a crop lens, it's quite heavy, but I would say that even as for a full frame lens, it isn't light either. And this is my main complaint, and you'll hear later that I believe that this disadvantage is really overwhelming as for such a combination with Fujifilm X-T3. You see how much bigger the thing is than the camera itself. Now you see how this lens looks on this body, and to me personally this looks more like a telephoto lens than a wide-angle lens. And the zooming ring is very smooth, but this is where the smoothness ends, because now I'm going to show you how works the auto exposure and the autofocus here. Now I've put this lens in full auto mode, so all the wheels stay at auto. If I do it like this, you see, well, it's not the autofocus, but you see the exposure. It goes with such unpleasant steps, which I don't like, and the way the aperture works here isn't quite good. But this is more due to this adapter. It's not the problem of the lens or the body. Okay, now I'm gonna test this lens as for the autofocus, and well, you see this zoom range. It isn't quite big, which is one more disappointing thing for me in this lens, that though it is a zoom lens, but it doesn't zoom really much. It's full frame equivalent from 28mm to roughly 15mm. And as for the autofocus, continuous autofocus, you see how it works. It's quite fast. Yes, it's okay. But if you try zooming in and out, well, sometimes it doesn't work good. Well, anyway, it will focus, but as for event shooting, I don't like the way sometimes it thinks too much. See, for example, on a Canon body, this lens performs better. So it's not question to the lens itself, but to the adapter and to the body, because Fujifilm autofocus, anyway, it is in some aspects it's worse than the Canons, although it is fast, so I don't have any complaints concerning its speed. Now I'm gonna compare Sigma to the closest competitor, to my opinion. It's Viltrox 23mm 1.4. This lens has similar field of view and large aperture, so they have, very similar. And now we have the aperture priority, it's 1.4 now. And we can see that in this mode there is no problems with exposure, and we can check the autofocus. And the autofocus, well, you see how it works, it's fine, but well, if we compare this to Canon's autofocus, it's not so smooth. Well, it's quick indeed, but when I change focus from one object to another, I will show you how it looks like on Canon, but it isn't that smooth. You can fumble with the settings in menu, but it doesn't change it quite much. But overall, to my opinion, this lens focuses a little better than the Sigma. So I've decided to test this lens on a full frame body just for fun. And this is Canon EOS R. When I zoom in and zoom out, you see no vignetting. And the problem is, well, with the newest firmware, it automatically enables crop, because you cannot disable it. I've tested this lens previously on this camera, and I could shoot with the full frame mode, and on the 35mm this lens had full coverage of the image sensor, and on the 18mm indeed it had crop. Now it crops anyway, and if you shoot in video mode, it's independently what you put, Full HD or 4K. Anyway, the image is cropped, you have no vignetting, but you can't use this lens as a full frame lens on this body. Now I'm gonna show you the smoothness of autofocus with the same lens but on a Canon body. Have a look at my hand, how smooth it changes with this transition from the focused object on the foreground to the background. I repeat, I have the same lens but on Canon body. So the question is not to the lens but to the Fuji's autofocus system. Some people say that the problem is that this is a third-party lens, but well, I have various different lenses and I can tell you for sure that the problem is in the autofocus system, not the lens. Because you see that the other body, well, autofocus is quite smooth. Let's have a look at the image quality. Here we have the Sigma 18-35 f1.4 on the Fuji and the aperture of 1.8. Let's zoom in. In the center it shows decent sharpness. Well, it's great. The sharpness in the center has no questions. But if we go in the corners, I see that the right corner is softer. Well, you see here in the Sony that it has some, well, some problems. It's not so important, but it's there. On the left side we can see that it's pretty sharp here. You see those boxes. It's quite good. And this tripod here is also sharp. Let's close it down to 2.8. We see how vignetting disappears at 2.8. The sharpness in the center, of course, is perfect. And on the right edge it's still not there. Well, it's better, but it's not there. Well, on the left side it's good. Well, it's fine. If we look at f4, sharpness in the center is perfect as before. On the right it became better, but it still has well, has to be improved. And on the left you see this box is also not perfect. This 4K, you see those letters, Panasonic, well, it's okay, but it's not perfect. If we look at 5.6 at the same place, well, it's good, but still I've seen even better. And on the right, well, it's okay. Yeah. Now the sharpness is even and nice, but these letters, well, on this book, they could have been better. Now I'm gonna compare these two different lenses. On the left side we have the Viltrox 23mm f1.4 and on the right the Sigma. Both lenses are stopped down to f5.6. We see that the exposure is the same on both lenses, but the Sigma looks brighter. That means that Sigma has a better t-stop. So at the same aperture of f5.6, this image looks brighter. That means that this lens gets more light. Well, if you look at it physically, it's really big, so it's not surprising. If you look at the right corner, we see that Viltrox at the closed aperture is sharper than the Sigma. You see this book? Well, yes, it is sharper, but this is a focal. This lens has a fixed focal length, so it's not surprising. Same as this box here, but it's not, you know, it's marginally sharper. Sigma is also very good. So this is nothing. This is something not to be. You shouldn't be afraid of this. I'm just this kind of a clinical test, just to see who is better. And this box here is also just a tiny bit sharper than the Sigma. And in the middle, by the way, it is a little bit sharper too. you see, but just a tiny bit. If you see this letter Sony on Viltrox, on the Sigma, the Viltrox does a little better job. Let's have a look at the left corner. In the left corner, for example, these boxes, well, here is it. I would say that it's the same. Now let's compare them at opened aperture. So here we have f1.4 and here f1.8. If you look at the middle, we can see that they both are sharp. But to my eye, Sigma is just a tiny bit sharper in these letters here. But it's, you know, it's a tiny difference. If we have a look at the corners, well, in this test, Viltrox is just a little worse. You see this letter is A6400, and here, well, Sigma is a bit better in the corners. The same book here, you see, it's vice versa, because at 5.6 the Sigma was better, and now it's better than the Viltrox. Then, if we have a look at these boxes, Viltrox is worse. You see that it's a little blurred in comparison to this one. So Viltrox at the edges is worse than the Sigma, and the very edges it's way worse at the opened aperture. Here you barely can read this 4K, while here you see these letters clearly. There is one more lens that I want to compare with Sigma. This is a full frame 35mm f2, and this shot is made on the Canon EOS R. And here we have the Sigma on the Fujifilm X-T3, and we see that, well, they have different exposure, so it's not correct to compare these images in terms of brightness. Let's have a look at the sharpness, what is so interesting to everybody. Well, in my test, the Canon, here you can see that it's just a little bit sharper than the Sigma. If you look at the corner, it's again sharper than the Sigma in the corner. We saw that Sigma is sharper than Viltrox, and Canon lens is even sharper than the Sigma. You see these letters from Canon and these letters here, so this lens is, well, it's obvious that it's just a bit better. But anyway, well, all lenses perform very well, so they're all quite satisfactory. There are no problems that you'll encounter in practical use. Here, both lenses on the left corner are quite nice. Let's have a look at those boxes on the left, and this time Canon also surpasses the Sigma. It's sharper. On the Viltrox, those corners were quite bad, truly speaking, yes, but Canon is better than both Sigma and Viltrox. Let's compare them, for example, at f4. On Sigma I chose 23mm because on the crop body it's same as 35mm on the full frame. Both cameras stood on a tripod, so you may see that framing is almost the same. And now let's have a look at f4. Well, Canon is again sharper, but Sigma is not bad either, but this image is even sharper. Let's look at the corners. I don't know why, but this image is softer. Even on the open aperture, it's been a little better than this one. Okay, let's have a look at the corner on the left. I don't know why, but Sigma is again a little worse than the Canon. I've made those shots on the tripod, and you see that these tripods here, they're quite sharp. I mean, the Canon is just way sharper in my test. Usually Sigma art lenses are perfect. Well, on this part of the image you see that it's quite sharp, but anywhere where I look, the Canon is sharper. Of course, it's a full frame lens on a full frame body. I don't know whether it's quite correct to compare them, but you see how sharp Canon is, and well, Sigma is okay too, but well, Canon is a little bit better. And by the way, you see the depth of field here. This tripod is out of focus here, and this tripod is in the same depth of field as the boxes on the back, because we have full frame here, and here we have a crop last bokeh test. Here I compared the Viltrox at 23mm f1.4 and the Sigma at 35mm 1.8, because I wanted to get the most bokeh, so I've chosen the longest focal length. This shot was made a little closer in order to maintain well, almost same framing, and we see that here you see the same aperture, except you see same exposure except for the aperture. Here we have 1.4 and here 1.8, and indeed this photo is quite brighter. Well, that's self-understanding. And now if we look closer, we clearly see that the Sigma's close-up image quality is way better than the Viltrox close-up image quality, because lenses often show different sharpness at different distances. So, well, Sigma in this respect is better. As for the bokeh, well, in this you see this EOS R letters. Well, both of them aren't ideal because, well, I've seen better. That's what I can say. As for this bokeh, well, you can judge by yourself whether this one better or this one better. To me, they look quite similar. I want to tell you my thoughts about this lens, and now currently I'm filming myself using this Sigma at 35mm at 1.8. We'll look how the autofocus works, the continuous autofocus with the face tracking. Well, even if it's okay now, I must say that when you use this adapter, well, this is one of the best adapters for Fujifilm, it is unreliable. You may film for like 15-20 minutes and then the focus can suddenly go to your background and you may speak for like 3-4 minutes without autofocus, and then it goes back to you. And these are the issues that I had with this lens, but the thing is not in the lens but in the adapter. When you mount something with a native Fujifilm X adapter like Viltrox or like native X mount lenses, I have the kit lens for 15 to 45, it works much more better in terms of reliability. As far well, concerning the focus speed, you have seen those tests. It's quite nice. It's just maybe a little bit slower than the lens with a native mount, but it's okay. I don't like the smoothness of this autofocus and the reliability. Yes, these are two main issues. Now I'm filming myself using the Canon EOS R 35mm f2, and you can compare what you have seen before with this lens 35 1.8. Both cameras shoot in crop mode, and EOS R 4K is in the crop mode. And you see that the depth of field, well, is not overwhelming. It's not something that surprises you, because, well, there is 2 meters to the camera, between me and the camera, and about 2 or 3 meters to the background. So you may notice if you shoot yourself with this crop, you won't get well, great blur. Indeed, if I put the camera closer, if I shoot myself, I don't know, like this, head portrait, then it will blow out your background more and you'll feel it. But what I wanted to say, that this lens is not something that is meant for bokeh. If you use 35mm f2 on full frame body, it gives you a bit more of that depth of field effect. But my criticism is, well, what are you gonna do with this? You bought a small body that is elegant, it's nice, and you use an adapter. You take here a giant lens instead of using something like this. Look, the differences between these two lenses. Why should you turn your nice camera? Well, why would you buy a small crop body like Fuji or some X-T3 or other body to use such a monster here? If you take this, you see how much lighter this is, how much smaller, and it feels just great when I put this small lens, and now I take this and feels like something telephoto. And the function that they do is the same, what you do with this lens and what you do with this monster. Concerning its optical qualities, this lens is top-notch. Indeed, it's very sharp. This is what all people love about Sigma Art lineup, but I'm not so fond of it because, well, the sharpness is not everything. Most people, well, not most, but many people think that in order to get sharp images, the only thing you need is a sharp lens, and this is false. I'll tell you a short story. I film myself quite often with the X-T3 and the cheapest native kit zoom lens, this 15 to 45, 3.5 to 5.6. It's the cheapest one. I bought it I bought it used, and its quality, I mean its physical quality is so-so. If you use nice lights, it looks very sharp, and people in comments ask me, well, what lens did you use? Maybe it's a Sigma Art, why is it so sharp and it looks so well? No, the thing is that you just have to use normal lights. The lights, well, lighting is the key, not the lens. Lens is secondary, but many people don't want to think, they just want to buy the lens and that's all. And that is why these Sigmas are so popular. But my main criticism concerning these optics is that it's, well, to my opinion, it's not worth it and it's useless because it's too large and it has no true zoom. Well, zoom from 18 to 35 millimeters is not much. Well, you can easily compensate this just by buying 23 millimeters. This lens, well, this or Fujinon, it's up to you, but I mean the focal length, this lens has fixed focal length. Because this is much lighter, it has more, the aperture is more open, but the most important that this Sigma has virtually no advantages. The zoom that it gives, you easily compensate it just by moving forward or backward, just like half a meter or a meter. I repeat myself, but this is not a zoom lens. It's essentially like some kind of extended fixed focal lens. If you want a nice zoom, it's better to buy like 17 to 55 2.8 because it gives you more of this range. Or even better, something like 18 to 135. Yes, it's a dark lens, you won't be able to shoot in bad lighting conditions, but again, if there is little light, just use a fixed focal lens. If you have enough light, buy a normal zoom lens, because this lens doesn't zoom quite enough, and well, and it's too large and big. It's not good to use on a Steadicam, because if I shoot video, there are two modes I do this. Either I take a Steadicam and a fixed focal lens, for example like this one, and they can move freely and it's easier to calibrate, it's not heavy, and I can work for hours like this. This Sigma Art is too heavy to use it on Steadicam. Well, indeed you can if you try, but you won't be zooming while doing this, and it's not comfortable and it's useless, because if you use Steadicam you don't need zoom and you don't need a lens that heavy, and if you don't use Steadicam, it's much better to use a nice zoom lens with a great range. So again, 18 to 135. This is a great event lens just to shoot something in general, and then instantly you zoom in and you get a close-up. With this lens you don't get normal wide angle, and either you don't get any telephoto range. So I don't like it, but I know that it's very popular because of its large aperture 1.8. But I don't well see there a nice application for this lens, because sharp images are, well, you can achieve them with many other lenses, and if you need a true zoom, this is not what you need, in my opinion, but it's just my personal opinion. But optically, of course, it's fine. Well, I forgot one more thing, that it doesn't have optical stabilization. Indeed, the new X-T4 has the sensor stabilization, which I didn't test yet, but if you use some older body like X-T3 and many other Fuji bodies, it's not convenient to shoot handheld video with this lens. It has no stabilization. For example, this Canon lens has stabilization, and sometimes I adapt it to Fujifilm just in order to shoot something without Steadicam and using my hands. So You know, if you put it on a tripod, you don't have any zoom. And if you shoot handheld, well, I've told you those disadvantages. Handheld, it's heavy, it's not stabilized, and it's not useful to put it on a Steadicam. So, when I look to in either direction where I look, what to shoot, I don't find any practical appliances for this lens. So that's my main criticism, although optically it's very nice, it's well built and so on. But, well, I don't know what to do with it. You either buy a small fixed focal lens or you buy a normal zoom lens. Well, that's my opinion. See you in next reviews.